Earlier, we spoke with Congressman Darin LaHood and Krishnamoorthi about infrastructure, and they're back again to talk about the spike in COVID-19. Let's first start with what Dr. Anthony Fauci said on Capitol Hill today about the Delta variant sweeping the country.
It has the capability of transmitting efficiently from human to human in an extraordinary manner, well beyond any of the other variants that we've experienced.
And this particularly is a threat to the unvaccinated. Congressman LaHood, a lot of the areas that are lagging in vaccination tend to be rural in Illinois, downstate, the Metro East area. Does that mean that things like mask mandates should come back?
Well, listen, I'll be the first one to admit that we got to do a better job with getting more vaccinations out there. There has been vaccine hesitation in many of the rural parts that I represent. And every time I get a chance to speak, I talk about the importance of getting the vaccine. I think most people have two choices. They either get COVID or they're going to get the vaccine. And we have to continue to do that. But I will say this. I don't think politicians ought to be the ones telling people to do that. You ought to listen to your medical professional that you're close with, your doctor, your nurses, people that you respect and that you value their opinion, and you value the science as it relates to the vaccine. So I continue to encourage people to get the vaccine, particularly in our rural parts. I also think we need to have a more robust public relations outreach in many of our rural areas. Finding people that can, whether it's farmers or a country western singer or somebody that can go in and talk about the vaccine, and in our urban areas too. I think a better PR campaign by the Biden administration, not having politicians tell you to do this, but people that they respect or value in their communities to do that, we need to do a better job.
And certainly there's a lot of misinformation to combat. Congressman Krishnamoorthi, the general wisdom here is that folks that want the vaccine have already gotten it, and folks that don't have it are the ones that don't want to get it. So how do you get more shots into arms?
Well, I'm glad that my colleague, Congressman LaHood, agrees that people should get vaccinated. I think one thing that, quite frankly, folks should do is, 90 of my Republican colleagues have not revealed their vaccination status, believe it or not. I think that they should, be among those who basically say, look, this is safe. This is what we should make sure everyone gets done, and that helps. But I agree with Darin that we should have people that folks respect, whether they are country western musicians. I'd like to see that country western song, by the way, come out about encouraging people to get vaccinated. But we also need to see pastors. We need to see folks in the community encourage others to get vaccinated. And we have to get rid of the disinformation online about vaccinations. Furthermore, Paris, I've authored something called NOVID. It's legislation that's a play on words, no more COVID, to not only get people here vaccinated, but also get people abroad vaccinated. Poor people, especially in countries throughout the world, are not getting vaccinated, and therefore they're serving as a petri dish for the next types of variants beyond the Delta variant. We should not wait for the Epsilon variant to realize that COVID anywhere is a threat to everyone everywhere, and we got to get rid of COVID. And so the United States needs to lead the way.
A lot of warning signs from public health officials. I want to move on to the select panel to look into what happened on January 6th. Congressman LaHood, your colleague downstate, Rodney Davis, is appointed this commission. What do you expect to see out of Republicans on this commission?
Well, I think the committee will be well served by Congressman Davis. He's our ranking member on House Administration. He will really add value to the committee. So we'll have to wait and see what happens in terms of the select committee and how they move forward with that. I will say this, obviously I've been following the Department of Justice investigation and prosecution. I think they've indicted and prosecuted over 400 people involved with the January 6th event on that day. As a former federal prosecutor and DOJ attorney, I think that's what we ought to. Anybody that was involved with that ought to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. We need to send a deterrent message. This type of behavior will not be tolerated. We also have companion investigations in the Senate with the Senate Rules Committee, and then also in the House, and now this committee. So, I think there will be some duplication, but I hope, again, that we hold people accountable and we send a message that the rule of law will prevail.
Congressman LaHood, the standard bearer for the GOP, former President Trump, who has repeated these false election claims of a stolen election, no doubt led to some of the anger here on January 6th. Do you believe the former president does have some culpability here or some responsibility for what happened?
Well, listen, I think the individuals that are being prosecuted right now are the ones responsible. Those are the ones, we just had one sentence yesterday to federal prison time, and we're going to continue to see more and more prosecutions. Those are the individuals that stormed the Capitol and broke in, and those are the ones that need to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And again, I think there has to be punitive measures for those that were involved with the planning and the orchestrating it. And those, again, I leave it up to our federal law enforcement agencies, our federal prosecutors to do that.
Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy has put Republican members, as we mentioned, Rodney Davis, also an ardent Trump supporter, Jim Jordan, on that panel. Do you expect Republicans in good faith to work with the other members of that panel to get to the bottom of the grand scope of what happened that day?
I hope so. I'm a little concerned about Jim Jordan. I think that the most important thing is that they need to seek the truth, Terrace. That's what the American people want. They want to know why this happened in the first place, who was involved, why the federal response under Donald Trump was so slow on the day in question, a very dark day, why so few people have actually been prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And then finally, how do we prevent this from happening again? We need to answer all those questions, and that's what my constituents and I believe the American people want to answer.
All right, we'll be following all these things, and our thanks to Congressman Darin LaHood and Raja Krishnamoorthi. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.